All right, what's up? What's going on? Let's get it popping. Let's get it popping. What's going on? All right, made a video about 10 days ago or so, and it was more of a mid-season review. And I feel like it gave a lot of good information about each and every team that was kind of close to making the tournament or in the tournament thus far. And now it's been 10 days and it feels like only 10 days, but there's a lot that's gone on in the 10 days. And in the 10 days I feel like I've stopped focusing on the top tier teams and where teams are at, depending on one, two, three, four. It's more of those teams are in, and I'm gonna look at their resume. I'll look at their strength of schedule, their RPI, their BPI at the end of the year. Whenever I'm gonna decide, who's my ones, who's my twos, who's my threes, because there are still games to be played. There is the conference tournament. The conference tournament will be games that you do not know who you're playing. So, you can gain wins from teams if you do get some wins in the conference tournament. Um, so not a lot has changed. I had about 19, 20 teams in my top tier. I still have about 19, 20 teams. Um, this time I've taken a picture, and hopefully I'll be able to put it in like at least the comments or the description or something, or maybe even like as the picture. But I want you to be able to look at it. I've spent some time on it. I've made a resume review that I want people to be able to see. I want people to be able to look at because it was the same numbers that I'm looking at. Um, and these are like the number side of it. This isn't the eye test side of it. And I try to be pretty 50-50. I think there's people out there that go kind of strictly by the numbers. I think there's people that go strictly by what they see with their eyes. They say, okay, why, I like this team better than I like that team, even though they've got a better resume than them, and that team, they have a good resume, but I don't really think they can do anything once they get to the tournament. But that team right there, their resume doesn't look that great, but they're a team I think could honestly do something in the tournament. Um, so and then I've kind of like the Nemo bracket, which is like the where you want to go. That one has kind of gained teams like they're not top tier, like they're the second tier teams, and they've kind of solidified themselves in, and they don't. And I mean, regardless of what happens for the rest of the year, they're in. Um, so just to kind of get an idea, if I don't get a picture up, or if somehow you don't see the picture, my top tier teams are Kansas, Gonzaga, Villanova, North Carolina, Arizona, Baylor, Oregon, UCLA, Louisville, Florida, Florida State, West Virginia, Duke, Cincinnati, Purdue, Kentucky, Butler, Virginia, Wisconsin. So that's my top tier. My next column is going to be my Nemo, and my Nemo is going to be Notre Dame, SMU, St. Mary's, Maryland, Iowa State, Creighton, Oklahoma State, Minnesota, Dayton, South Carolina, Xavier, Northwestern, VCU, Virginia Tech, and Miami. Miami's on the next column, but Miami has solidified themselves into the tournament as far as I'm concerned. So then you go on, and my next, as you continue on this list, these are the teams to me that are just into the tournament. Obviously, the higher up on the list, the better off you are getting in. The lower on this list, the worse it off for you if there's another team that's behind you that can jump you. Um, so Michigan is my first team. They're pretty much in. they're a team that I had very low on my Finding Nemo bracket, and they've won 2 games against Indiana, which was huge. And then they've continued to win. Their resume looks good, um, and and to me that they're in, regardless of how they play in their conference tournament or whatever. USC is a team. Their resume is not that strong, but they're 21-6 or 21-7. They've won most of the games they've needed to win. They have 2 good wins, even though they come at home. 2 good wins, and they're probably in. Arkansas is 21-7, 10-5 in conference play. A big win against South Carolina last weekend. I have them in, and I think they'll be in there in third right now in the SEC, and that's tied with South Carolina. And their resume is not as good as South Carolina's, but I think Arkansas will be in the tournament. Now, what I will say is at the bottom of my board, I have my resume review, which I've got 8, 12. I've got about 20 to 22 teams on it, which I'm showing their win-loss, their conference win-loss, their RPI, their strength of schedule, and their BPI. Now, let me explain a couple of these things in my resume review. Win-loss and conference win-loss. Win-loss is one of those things. Don't look at it too much when you're trying to judge a resume. If you like a team and you look at their strength of schedule and you look at their RPI and it's good, you can somewhat throw their record out of the window. You can't throw their record out of the window if they don't have any big wins. But what you can do is if you can go and look at their resume and you can find that they have some big wins, that's a legitimate way that you can put them into the tournament. So you can I use my knowledge of watching all the games throughout the year, and then I use the numbers to kind of break down what kind of schedule they played throughout the year, use their record to and I'll be honest, there's some teams on here that once I started looking at records, or not records, started looking at resumes and saw how tough their schedule was, I started to kind of reconsider them, and I started to say, hey, you're not in the tournament right now, but you legitimately, if you can get some wins in the next couple of weeks, and then you can get a couple of wins in your conference tournament, you legitimately can make a claim to get into the tournament because you played such a tough record, such a tough schedule all year. But what I was saying is Arkansas is my first team that I have in my resume review. And what I like about having Arkansas there is what Arkansas is like, they don't have that tough of an art. I mean, they've got a tough RPI and strength of schedule. It's top 100, but like it's lower than some of the other ones that have like records of like 16-12 or 14-13, 15-13, but they're 21-7. So like it kind of shows how a team that has a better record can like, not that it's okay to not have that tough of a schedule or whatever, but just kind of give you a contrast of a good team with their RPI and their strength of schedule going 21-7 versus like another team in their conference going 15-13 and going 8-7 in conference, but like playing a way tougher schedule throughout the year. And so so let's get on with my list. So Michigan State is in, like, that would be like considered like a 10 or 11 seed at this point. Michigan State, they played a very tough schedule all year, and they played a very tough schedule all year, and they've done enough. They went 9-6 in their conference. They've done enough. Their RPI and strength of schedule is is good, and they're one of the teams for me that's more in than out. Okay, Seton Hall. Seton Hall's a team that I like. They're more of a team that with your eyes you like more than you look at. The resume backs up what is good. It backs up good, and they have a lot of good wins. So they're a team that you can honestly put in the tournament. Providence. So Providence is a team that um, I think it's somewhat of a surprise. They're a team more of that I like. Them and Seton Hall are so like different to me because them and Seton Hall are like um, them and Seton Hall are like the same but different. Like um, I like Seton Hall on the court. I don't like Providence on the court, but Providence has just as good of a resume as Seton Hall does, and uh, like or maybe even of a better resume, honestly. So I went ahead and put them in. Cal to me, Cal's got an 18-9 record. They've got a better record than some of these other teams. And the fact that the Pac-12 doesn't have a lot of teams in it already, I think bodes well with them. They played 45th toughest schedule, 45 RPI. Um, that I think those things bode well for them. My only thing that doesn't look good for them is they don't have a lot of good wins. Their best win is USC at home, or I think at USC, and they won by one. It might even have been at home. Yeah, it was on the road. Um, and so Cal's one of those teams I had more up higher, and now they've kind of dropped because they're not getting wins. They had Cal on the ropes, and then Dylan Brooks killed them the other night. Um, Kansas State is a team that I really like. Like they're kind of like for me like Seton Hall. I like them on the field. My eye test, I like them on the court. But then you look at their resume, and the resume really doesn't help them at all. And then head to head, they have a loss to TCU at home. Them and TCU have the exact same record. TCU has a stronger strength of schedule. TCU has a stronger RPI. These things don't bode well for Kansas State. I think Kansas State, that the thing that does bode well for Kansas State though for me, and the reason that I have them higher than TCU is because they have better wins than TCU. TCU has wins against Illinois State and Iowa State at home. Kansas State has wins on the road against Baylor, has wins on the road against Oklahoma State, and they have a win at home against West Virginia. 3 good wins in the top 50 RPI, which are 3 wins that are all 3 wins that are better than what TCU's gotten all year. So that's why I have, even though the only thing that sucks for Kansas State is their their loss at home to TCU, and that's one of TCU's best wins. Um, Syracuse is one of those teams that you look at their resume, and it's like it's really trash. Like not well, I can't say that. You look at their RPI and their strength of schedule, and it's really trash. Like they have a 78 RPI. They have the 74th strength of schedule, and they have a 17-12 record. They went 8-5 in non-conference play, somewhere where you should be able to get a lot of wins. One of the things that's really saving them at this point is the fact they have a 9-7 record in the ACC. Earlier, I wasn't even looking at their resume as much. It was more of an eye test in my last video. And Syracuse, to me, the fact that the ACC is the toughest conference, them going 9-7 in that conference, to me, I felt like this team's going to make the tournament. And I think they will make the tournament. They need to continue to win. They lost to Georgia Tech. They barely got past Duke. They won on that buzzer beater. Um, that loss might have even put them out. Georgia Tech's a team that beat them. Georgia Tech's a team that's going to have them again at Syracuse, and so if Georgia Tech can beat them, I think Georgia Tech will jump Syracuse into the bracket. They both have very very similar resumes as far as strength of schedule and RPI. And they both have a lot of good wins. But the one thing that I will say about Syracuse and Georgia Tech, all their good wins have been at home. The Georgia Tech's best win on the road, I think, is VCU, RPI wise. And then, so my next team after Syracuse is TCU. We already kind of talked about TCU. They kind of got the same record as at the exact same record as Kansas State. They have a win against Kansas State. I don't like them on the court as much as I like Kansas State on the court, but they've played a tough strength of schedule, and their RPI is not that bad. But my thing is my one thing I will say is, like, when you play in a tough conference, you have so many opportunities to get big wins. And to me, TCU just hasn't done enough. Like, their resume bodes well enough for against other teams. Their numbers look good against other teams behind them. But, like, to me, like, they don't have a legitimate, like, case to, like, not be left out. But for me, they're in right now. They're in. They haven't got any big wins other than the Kansas State one. Iowa State at home, which was a long time ago, and also the Illinois State, which was a long time ago. These are like my last couple teams in the tournament. My very last team that's in the tournament, I think, is a little bit of a surprise, and I think they really will. I think the SEC will surprise people on Selection Sunday. I think there's a lot of SEC teams that kind of have, like, and I'm gonna say Vanderbilt, Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, and Ole Miss, and they've kind of beat each other up all year. But they've all got well, not all of them, but like Georgia, Tennessee, and Vanderbilt have very very tough. They played very very tough schedules. Vanderbilt played the second toughest schedule. They have really good wins. They have wins on the road. One of my things too is wins on the roads. Wins on the road mean a lot more than wins at home, and they've got good wins on the road. Their resume looks good. Their numbers are better than Syracuse's. It's number 2 strength of schedule, 47th RPI. They have a positive record in their conference. They're 15-13. They just come off of a win against South Carolina, and they've came off a win against Tennessee on the road, and they have a conference tournament coming up. But they do have Kansas, or they're not Kansas. They have Kentucky and Florida coming up, and then they have their conference tournament. To me, I think Vanderbilt has a prime opportunity to get into the tournament with their strength of schedule, their RPI, and if they can come out with like a positive record and have like win like at least 2 games in the SEC tournament, they're a team that I look that can come out and get it. And then so if you look at Joe Lenardi and his bracketology, one of the things that really surprised me today was when you look at BPI. So BPI, I have BPI up on my board just to kind of have like a contrast. I don't really go by BPI. I don't really go by BPI, strength of schedule, RPI, but I like to look at these things, and I like to look at the big wins and I don't really look at bad losses, but big wins and stuff like that, just to see, where teams were, because I know every team doesn't play the same schedule. I know what teams are good. I know what teams are bad. I know what teams, but sometimes there's kind of hidden stuff that you got to go and you got to look at. And, obviously strength of schedule is how tough of a schedule they play. RPI, you know, I don't know the exact definition of RPI, but RPI is basically like strength of schedule and like uh, depending on who you played, like all this bullshit put together and a number. And RPI, like I will say, the people that do Selection Sunday, I don't know if they don't really watch college basketball that much throughout the year, and they just kind of go by the RPI because that's what like the computer like says or whatever. But like a lot of times they'll go by RPI over like they'll go by RPI or like the analysts will notice that RPI is way more of like a stronger component than like anything else sometimes. So I always just kind of keep that in consideration. I like to look at the RPI. And then BPI is just I feel like BPI is some bullshit that Joe Lenardi made, and like I feel like it's kind of like basically how like it's like a power in college basketball power index is what it's called, what it stands for, or something like that. And I think basically what it is like to me how they feel like they kind of like what I do is like they put the eye test and they put the resumes together and they say what they think, what they'll do. And and to me it was a surprise. I don't really like the BPI because I don't really agree with the numbers and I don't really understand the whole shit. But okay, so like Marquette's my first team out. So, but Marquette is this is something that's funny about like the difference between me and Joe Lenardi. He has Marquette as like a 10 seed. Like he has Marquette like pretty much pretty in. Like I don't think they're net like I don't think their last four are in. I think they're like next to last four in or whatever. And to me they've kind of got like the same strength of schedule and RPIs like a Syracuse. They've got some good they've got some good wins in conference play, but like you look at if you get on a CBS Sports Line and you go to Bracketology and then you go to team comparison and then you compare Marquette and Providence's resumes. They have basically the same wins, or a lot of the same wins. Providence has more wins than Marquette does. Marquette has some bad losses to some other bubble teams. And then head to head, Providence beat Marquette at Marquette. So I don't understand how he has Marquette in and Providence out because he has Providence out and like not that. I think next four out or like net or I think he has them as like the third or fourth team out. Like they're not that close to being in. And eye test wise, like I said, I don't like Providence, but eye test wise, I don't like Marquette either. So, but I put Providence in. I kept Marquette out. But Marquette's like right there on the edge. They're right there. Georgia Tech's a team that I like eye test wise. Their resume is starting to back up their play. They've got good wins. The only problem is their good wins at home. Like I said, their RPI and strength of schedule doesn't bode well. But they're a team that I like. Clemson. I don't know if I talked about. I think I talked about Georgia Tech last time, but basically, Ben Lammers is a beast. Defensively blocking, and he's good on the low block. Yeah, I think I talked about them. And then Josh Aoki's a good freshman that they have. Now Clemson is a team that they have lost so many close games. They're a team that if like they had an extra spot in the tournament, I think they should throw them in there because Clemson played a really tough schedule. I really would like to see Blossom Game get to play in an NCAA tournament. He's such a hard worker, hard player. But like they just have so many losses, so many close losses, and like they're like 4-11 in ACC play. There's just like there's another ACC team that's more deserving than them named Georgia Tech. Tennessee's a team that with their strength of schedule and they've got a couple of good wins, have helped themselves, but they're to me they're not in. They're the fourth team out. And to me, no, regardless, they're going to be behind Vanderbilt. But them and Vanderbilt swapped. Vanderbilt beat them at home. They beat Vanderbilt at home. But as of right now, Vanderbilt has a positive record in the SEC, has a better record in the SEC. If Vanderbilt and Tennessee were to meet again in the SEC conference tournament, I think Vanderbilt, I think the winner would kind of get the nod in a sense, maybe. But both of them, their strength of schedule and RPI bode well for both teams. Wake Forest is a team. Love watching John Collins play. I know I've already talked about him. Wake Forest is a team that they played a tough schedule. They've got a good RPI. BPI is even good. And they played in the ACC. My one problem with them, they have only one win in the top 50 RPI, which was against Wake Forest or against Miami. They did beat Pitt at home the other night, which was a big win because Pitt's another bubble team. But the thing is about Wake Forest is they have 2 losses to Clemson, so Clemson kind of has the upper hand on them. So Texas Tech's a team that I don't like resume wise. Their BPI is good; it's 34. But RPI and strength of schedule's 87. RPI is 102. So not a good, doesn't look good for them. And the fact that Kansas State and TCU are barely in, they're not. The only thing that bodes well for Texas Tech is the fact that they have wins against TCU and Kansas State. Like I said, they're another one of those teams that can build off the conference tournament though. So they're not out, but it doesn't look great right now. Georgia's a team that played a tough schedule. They've got a good RPI. I don't know if they can do enough to get into the tournament, but they're kind of the same, conference tournament. Pitt, same. Michael Young, Jamil Artis are basically their entire team. They've got to do so much. Rhode Island, for me, is still a team that's on here. Rhode Island doesn't have a lot of good wins other than their Cincinnati win at a neutral site. But their numbers are good. Strength of schedule 59, RPI 41, BPI or RPI 49, BPI 41. They're 18-9, 10-5. That's not that great for a mid-major. But my thing about Rhode Island is I think they can make a run in the conference tournament. That's why I have them still on this list. So Illinois is a team that nobody's talking about. I kind of even feel weird having them on this list. I don't really. They're a team that I don't really like on the court either. But when you look at their numbers, you have to consider them. 12th strength of schedule, 59th RPI, and 67 in the BPI. That's not high, but so they're a team that has to build off the conference tournament. Has to get some good wins. My thing is they beat Northwestern twice and VCU at a neutral site. Northwestern twice is good. They're a tournament team. And then Indiana is a team that, the one thing that you can't take away from Indiana is they beat Kansas and they beat North Carolina and they have a win against Michigan State. 3 very good wins on their year. But what doesn't help, RPI 43 or strength of schedule 43, RPI 99, BPI 30, whatever that means. They're 15-13 on the year, 5-10 in conference play. Illinois is 16-12 on the year and 6-9 in conference play. So that's one thing to consider. The one thing that Indiana does have over Illinois is head-to-head Indiana won. So that kind of goes with my bubble teams. To me, all those teams that I said towards the end have to do work. But like right now, Seton Hall, Providence, Cal, Kansas State, Syracuse, TCU, Vanderbilt. Those teams are all, in a sense, on the hot seat. They need to continue to win. They need to continue to do more to make it to the tournament. And teams that are right on their heels, Marquette and Georgia Tech. Marquette and Georgia Tech are right on all like on definitely on TCU and Vanderbilt's heels, Syracuse's heels, Kansas State's heels, both Marquette and Georgia Tech, and in other people's eyes, Marquette and Georgia Tech may even be ahead of Vanderbilt. So this is really it's going to be really close. The one thing I will say, I don't know. I can't really relate to years past, but it hadn't felt like years past. But you feel like you've got a lot of teams that really aren't that good. I mean, you've got good teams. Don't get me wrong, but like it's like you don't have any like great teams in here that you want to throw in there. Other than like I would want to throw Rhode Island in there, but like um you don't feel bad, taking any of these teams out because you're like, well, you just didn't do enough during the year. But like at the same time, like you don't feel like any of these teams really have the potential to really make any noise. So a lot of these teams are just a couple of teams that are going to be filling a spot. But it's just cool, kind of looking at the numbers. It's cool. To kind of have an insight of where your team's at, or what your team needs to do in the next couple of weeks to make it to the tournament. But to me, it's funny because like these so-called bubble teams that we talk about, and these bubble teams that like which teams are going to make it in, which teams won't. Like I really will be surprised, looking at all these teams, if any of them do anything in the tournament, because to me, they just really, they really like that, I just don't see them like doing something. So, I don't know. To me, it's just kind of the thought that it's crazy that we put so much emphasis on these last couple teams that we get into the tournament, that we don't want to get them wrong and stuff like that. But like in reality, their chances of winning the tournament is slim to none. So then, some other things that are so some things to talk about. Conference tournaments. So the small teams, this conference tournament will start on March 1st, which is, let's see what day it is. That's like a week from now, and or around a week from now. I don't really know. And so the small schools conference tournaments will start. So then that'll be the last week of the bigger tournaments. They'll start winding down. And so, if you look at Joe Lenardi's, brackets and stuff like that, I hadn't wrote down, every, number one team out of each conference. Well, I think I did. Never mind. Out of each conference, in a sense, and looked at it and decided what teams I thought will get in and what teams will get out, because a lot of times at this time of the year, like I said in my last video, the number one team will slip up, will lose the game, and then you'll never hear about them again, because they're gonna they're not gonna make the tournament. Like they're not gonna make it. There's no way they can. And then like some other small school makes it in. So as I was looking at standings and looking at these some of these smaller schools, looking ahead to the conference tournament, Florida Gulf Coast in the Atlantic Sun Conference has been in first place for most of the year, and Lipscomb was in second place. So those are two teams that you could look to. But I would say Florida Gulf Coast could be a team that could win that one. Vermont and Stony Brook are two teams that have played very good all year in the what conference is that? American East Conference. And Vermont, I think, is like undefeated in conference play. Vermont's one of my mid-major monsters. But they could potentially lose to Stony Brook, and then Vermont wouldn't make the tournament. So UNC Asheville and Winthrop are two teams that are atop of their conference, and they, to to me, both of those teams are have been kind of at the top all year, and one of them may advance, or some other team in their conference may advance. Furman and East Tennessee State are the top two teams in that conference. Middle Tennessee and Louisiana Tech are the top two teams of the Conference USA. Middle Tennessee is one of the teams. If they were to lose their conference tournament, they could potentially take one of the at-large bids. This is a slim chance, though, but they do have a win against Vanderbilt, which bodes well for them. UNC Wilmington and Charleston are two teams that have been at the top of that conference throughout the year. I think UNC Wilmington is the favorite more. Valparaiso was a mid-major monster earlier in the year, but they lost to Oakland about a week ago or so. And so, I've kind of put it as, Valparaiso or Oakland is going to be the team in the tournament. Princeton and Harvard, they're going to have a 4-team Ivy League tournament this year. Those are the two top teams right now. And then Akron and Ohio are the top two teams of the MAC conference. Akron is my favorite to win the conference, but Ohio is the team that's kind of the second best. So this is honestly a really good matchup between two teams that have battled it out all year, and it's one of those whichever team wins the conference tournament's getting in. It's CSU Bakersfield, and then New Mexico State. And both of these teams have really good records, and I think the winner will get in. I know the winner will get into the tournament. North Carolina Central is a team that is really at the top of their conference. They're kind of the favorite to win that. Bucknell is the favorite for the Patriot League. Belmont would be the favorite of the Ohio. I think it's the Ohio Valley League. And then UT Arlington, they've got a win against St. Mary's, a win against Texas. They've got some good wins on their resume. They're a team that could potentially be looked at as an at-large if they don't win their conference tournament. But I look at them as winning their conference tournament and honestly kind of making some noise if they do make it to the tournament. So the biggest conference tournament game of the conference tournament week will be Wichita State versus Illinois. If Illinois can win this game, they'll get the automatic bid. They have nothing to worry about. If Wichita State loses, I think Wichita State is clearly into the tournament. I think they've done enough throughout the year. I think in the past they've built themselves enough of a resume to say, hey, we're a good enough team that we're going to get an at-large bid over some of these smaller schools or some of these bigger schools and knock them off. But my problem for my thing that I'm scared about is Wichita State. If Wichita State wins, they'll get the automatic bid. They'll probably get like a 7 or 8 seed. And then Illinois State had an awesome year. So on my board too, on my resume review, I put Iowa State just so you could look at Illinois State. I put their numbers just so you could compare their numbers to all the other schools. They're 24-5, 16-1. Strength of schedule is 131. RPI is 33. BPI is 66. So they're kind of like, if you watch my last video, if you go back and watch my last video, they're kind of like Monmouth this year. And last year I put Monmouth in my tournament. This year I'm not putting Illinois State in my tournament if they don't win their conference. They don't have enough good wins, and I know how the committee people think, and I know that they won't put them in the tournament. So I'm not even going to waste my time with them. But I just, I want to put that out there. I want to say it for the Missouri Valley Conference. It bodes a lot better for Illinois State winning it and then because Wichita State has a better chance of getting an at-large bid than Illinois State does. And Illinois State's best win is against Wichita State. And if they've got 2 losses against Wichita State and 1 win against Wichita State, that doesn't look good. I don't necessarily know what Wichita State's record or resume looks like, but I know they have a lot of better wins than Illinois State. So Nevada is a team that's top of the not WAC. Is that wait, is that right? Yeah, I guess it's the WAC. Or no, Mountain West. WAC's old school. Mountain West Conference. And they had a game against Boise State on Wednesday that they won at the end. So Boise State's the same team that you're going to be looking at too in the Mountain West. You're gonna have Monmouth. Monmouth is the head of that conference still. They're a team that we're looking at. So then to talk about kind of the bigger conference tournaments, I won't really spend a lot of time on this. The one thing I will say, just like kind of like the smaller ones, some of the bigger schools don't always come out on top. Sometimes they'll play in the championship, but sometimes this is where kind of teams that shouldn't make the tournament sometimes get in, or a team that the resume was suspect, they get an automatic bid from a tournament, from the conference tournament. And so Gonzaga St. Mary's, I think for sure will be in the championship game between them two. And then obviously I think Gonzaga will win. They'll finish their undefeated season. SMU and Cincinnati, these would be my 2 favorites. But at the same time, I don't really – I really have a feeling that Cincinnati or SMU won't win their tournament, and that would be bad for these bubble teams because it would take away one of their spots, because they would have to give SMU or Cincinnati a at-large bid because they didn't win their conference tournament. So that could be a Houston or a UConn or a Memphis. If one of them could somehow pull something out, they could make it to the tournament by winning the conference tournament. And then, like I said, Rhode Island. Rhode Island's a team that if they could win their conference tournament, they're third. They're one of the best teams in the A10. So if they can get a good win against Dayton, they get a good win against VCU, a win against Richmond. I'm not saying that all 3 of those wins. I'm just saying any of those 3 wins would be good wins. And if they win the conference tournament, then they're automatically in. But obviously, I think I've got Rhode Island as my favorite to win the A10 tournament. I'm saying it now, but I wouldn't be surprised if VCU or Dayton won. I honestly wouldn't even be surprised if Richmond won. But Richmond winning or Rhode Island winning is going to take a spot away from somebody else. And that's something that when you're doing these brackets, or not brackets, but when you're doing these resumes and stuff, when you got your last 4, those are things that you're never taking into consideration. That I might not get as many spots as I think I'm getting. I think I'm getting 45 at-large bids. I may be getting less than that if not every champion, or if not every team that's already in the tournament doesn't win their conference tournament. So Butler, so the winner of the Big East never wins their conference tournament. I would not be surprised to see Villanova lose. I would not be surprised to see Seton Hall, Providence, or Marquette winning the Big East tournament. That goes for even Xavier and Creighton and Butler. I look at Xavier with the loss of Edmund Sumter and Maurice Watson to Creighton and to Xavier. I look at them as just as good as Seton Hall, Providence, and Marquette. So when those teams battle it out, I look at them as about the same now without those team stars. If Villanova's kind of playing lackadaisical, not really caring we're in the tournament, these teams need it way more than we need it. Butler kind of the same way. You know what I mean? I would not be surprised, but my favorites for the tournament would be Butler and Villanova. But like I said, not surprised for Marquette, Seton Hall, or Providence to win. And when those teams win their tournament or even go deep, make a deep run, that creates even more for your resume. So Kentucky, Florida, it would honestly be my favorites for the SEC. Usually the SEC, the top two teams that were during the year usually make it to the SEC championship, or at least one of them does. I would not be surprised to see Kentucky and Florida in it. For me, in the ACC, it's a toss-up. Usually the top team, the team that wins the ACC, never wins the ACC tournament. But for me, it's a toss-up. North Carolina, you got to put them there. To me, they're the top team. They're the best team. Coming off wins against Virginia and Louisville. Duke's hot right now. Duke's playing really well. Duke's found themselves. Their young guys have found themselves. They're a team that they could make a tournament. They could win the tournament. Florida State's a team that I feel like I said earlier, they're one of the best teams. They're one of the deepest teams. I feel like, to me, Florida State's one of those, like, they're a tournament team. Like, oh, we got a tournament this weekend. We're competing for a championship this weekend. Like, this isn't just regular season ball. Like, I think they'll wake up. I think they'll kind of want it more. And then, like, so I think they're potentially a team that could win it. Louisville plays good defense. They got good big men. They match up good against all three of these teams. So Louisville's always a team that I think and is good. And Louisville's one of those teams too for me. Rick Pitino is eating them up every fucking play. So they're constantly, there's no sleeping and there's no, oh, we were asleep all day, or Louisville didn't come to play. Like, Rick Pitino's on their ass like all the time. For the Big Ten, Purdue's kind of striving right now. They're playing the best. Everybody else at the top, Maryland, Northwestern, and Wisconsin, they'll win a game, they'll drop a game. So they've been kind of not playing as well, not as strong, and so I don't know how they'll do in the tournament. Usually, one of the top teams of the during the year the Big Ten will make the tournament versus kind of like a bubble or smaller team. Indiana's a team that can make a deep run. Illinois, think about a Penn State. There's a lot of teams that are at the bottom of that have a lot of heart. A lot of at the bottom of the Big Ten, Iowa have a lot of heart. And so I wouldn't be surprised if one of those teams make a run. Minnesota's the team I kind of feel like it's kind of like Florida State. It's tournament. There's a tournament going on. Like, we want to show out. They're a team that's got a good 5, a good 7 players. Northwestern can gain some good wins, can build their resume. They're a 20-8 team they're kind of like Arkansas. They don't have that crazy of a resume, but they've won the games they needed to win, hadn't lost the games they needed to lose. But I think Purdue's kind of, I think Purdue and Wisconsin are kind of the top teams of that. And I think Purdue's kind of the favorite to win the Big Ten tournament. Kansas, West Virginia, Baylor are my favorites. Kansas, I will say they always win the Big 12, but they don't always win the Big 12 tournament. Last year Oklahoma was the team that won it. I wouldn't be surprised if West Virginia wins, if Baylor wins, if Oklahoma State's super hot right now. Iowa State's a veteran team that could win it. So all those teams, Kansas State might even be like, we need to win this to make the tournament, and they might even make a run. But favorites, Kansas, West Virginia, Baylor. And then the Pac-12 is a toss-up. To me, Arizona's the top team. Record-wise and by beating Oregon and UCLA both. But Oregon and UCLA are right there. Oregon and UCLA have beat each other once, and so they're right there together. And I think Arizona and UCLA will probably play for the championship game. And then I honestly think UCLA will win the championship. But like I was saying, it's going to be very close, a very close tournament. So then I want to talk about, so if you go and you look at RPI, BPI, strength of schedule, now take into account these things are constantly changing. So, you might look at mine and be like, what the heck? He's got these numbers for Clemson, and now Clemson's numbers are different, or Georgia Tech's numbers are different. My thing is these things are going to be relatively the same. They're not. It's not going to be like Clemson's going to have the 17th strength of schedule one day, and then they're going to have the 74th strength of schedule another day. It's going to fluctuate between about 10 to 20, numbers here and there. So, but understand that those things change. And then let me see here. Okay, so basically covered everything I wanted to cover. I just want to talk about player of the conferences and then player of the year candidates for the ACC. Justin Jackson from North Carolina, Luke Kennard, top of my list. John Collins. John Collins probably won't win because their record's not as good. Blossom Game is a very good player. Probably won't win because of his record. London Parentes, I think is not underrated. Everybody knows how good he is, but I think the fact that Virginia is really not that good, I think he has to do a lot, and the fact that he's really not a score first guy really doesn't help them that they don't have any scorers. I want to put Jamel Artis on this list because he's one of the leading scorers in the ACC, and him and Michael Young do so much work for Pitt. I think he's a player of the year. Ben Lammers, I think the fact that defensively with his offense, I think he's a big part of why Georgia Tech is where they're at. So he's another guy I want to put on the list. I've got Dwayne Bacon on the list too. Dwayne Bacon's not a guy that's going to win, and Dwayne Bacon's got a good team around him, so he's not a guy that is going to get noticed as much. For the Big Ten, it's obviously Biggie Swanigan's probably the guy. For me in the ACC, I didn't really say who my winner was. It's hard to say who I would say the winner is. Don't forget Dennis Smith also out of the ACC. But I would say probably Luke Kennard will probably be the winner of the ACC Player of the Year. When Duke was at its worst, he was playing his best, and he's continued to play good. Just his way to get into the lane, hit those little shots. I like him. For the Big Ten, Biggie Swanigan is probably going to win it. And, he's the best player by far. Players that's behind him that are next will be Happ, Ethan Happ, and Melo Trimble. Brian McIntosh has done really good for Northwestern. Miles Bridges is an explosive player. And those are my guys for the Big Ten. But Biggie Swanigan, Caleb Swanigan's going to be my guy for the Big Ten. For the Big East, Josh Hart's my guy. But Josh Hart, Jalen Brunson, Marcus Foster, Justin Patton, Angel Delgado, Carrington, what's his name? Keelan Martin for Butler, Carrington for Seton Hall, and then Boulette, Trayvon Boulette for Xavier. Kind of my players of the year for that conference. But Hart's my winner. Probably Marcus Foster's close second. Angel Delgado's probably third. For the American Conference, Semi Moj, I think it's a Moje, big center for SMU. Talked about it in my last video. He's their best player. Dedrick Lawson's probably two. Dedrick Lawson plays for Memphis. Jalen Adams plays for UConn. He's probably third. I think his name's Jacob Evans. I've been calling him Shaq Evans. Jacob Evans for Cincinnati, and I like Troy Copain. I think he's such a leader. I think he's the next guy on the list. For the SEC, I've got Thornwell as my number one guy. I know what Malik Monk's done and what Fox has done is great as freshmen, but I've got Thornwell as my top guy. Monk is 2, Fox is 2nd, J.J. Frazier 4th, and then Sebastian Saiz is my 5th guy on that list. And then Pac-12, Dylan Brooks, to me, is a little bit higher than Lonzo Ball. He's getting like the veteran edge. The fact he's coming off of an injury, the fact that he is on a very very good team, but the fact that he is the go-to guy on that team, and Mr. Game Winner 2 times this year. I've seen it at the buzzer. There's no one as clutch as him, other than maybe Seth Allen, but he's my guy for the Pac-12. And Lonzo Ball is the only guy that has any conversation with Dylan Brooks. I think Markel Fultz and I think Laurie Markkinen and Ivan Rabb are guys that you can put on the list to add 3 more names. But Lonzo Ball and Dylan Brooks are the only 2 guys on that list. And then Big 12 is obviously Frank Mason's my guy for the Big 12. Josh Jackson is a guy too. He's not second, but he's a guy that's on the list. Monte Morris, senior point guard, one of the best assist to turnover ratios. Jawan Evans for Oklahoma State, great player. One of my favorite players to watch. Jeffrey Carroll for Oklahoma State has really improved. He'll probably be one of the most improved players. Devontae Burton for Iowa State. Don't forget about Motley. Motley's probably 2 on this list. I'm saying Motley late, but Motley's probably number 2 on my list. Jonathan Motley right after Mason. And then for player of the year, I've got to go with Biggie Swanigan. Biggie Swanigan, 23 double doubles. Definitely most dominant player in the Big Ten, and he just continues to be dominant. He's my number 1 guy. Frank Mason would probably be number 2 on my list, and Frank Mason may be the player of the year. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Frank Mason's player of the year. Josh Hart would be a close 3rd. Motley would be a close 4th. I would say Luke Kennard. Luke Kennard would probably be the 5th guy on this list. Then you go with like a Dylan Brooks. Dylan Brooks. Jonathan. That's if I didn't say. I think I already said Motley. Hap. Thornwell. Evan, Juwan Evans, Justin Jackson, Lonzo Ball. You can go ahead and put Lonzo Ball on the list, even though he's a freshman. Put Justin Jackson on the list already. But I mean, my 3 guys that really have a legitimate shot: Caleb Swanigan, Josh Hart, and Frank Mason. And I think America's favorite, the guy that'll win it will be Frank Mason. My favorite is Biggie Swanigan, though.